Welcome back to the Safe, Secure 360 podcast. We're continuing our series in current events about safety and security related topics. Religion in America is a big deal. Churches and places of worship are everywhere. How do we protect and how do we prevent terrible tragedies from happening in our places of worship? We're going to talk about that today. This is the Safe, Secure 360 podcast. There is safety in numbers.
The information provided in our podcasts is for general information uses only and is not intended as legal advice. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are their own. Always consult with a qualified professional before making safety and security decisions. For more information about this topic, check out our website at SAFESECURE360.com. Well, Robert, thank you for sitting down and talking to us about this. You have experience working with churches and churches that are connected to private schools and the difference in what a church needs than what other locations of gathered people might need. So help us understand, why are churches a target of violence? What's going on to attract people to that?
Churches or places of worship are a congregational place of emotion and of need sometimes, and of focus and of concentration. And when we gather in a church service or some type of religious experience, we kind of singularly focus on why we're there. Typically, everyone is seated. They're all facing the same direction. They are in prayer. They are listening to the message that the person's delivering. They're singing. There is an internal focus of attention inside themselves and inside that experience inside the church. When you have that strong of a focus, you are then distracted from external influences and from external things that are happening around you. Churches have been, and I think unfortunately will continue to be, places where criminals know that there's an inattentive population of people that are gathered together, and for whatever motivation they may have, they decide that they're going to victimize and do victimize that church population. So the church is left with a problem. How do they balance security and safety along with being a welcoming, nurturing place of respite and of worship? How do you balance those two things together? In Texas, we have had what appears to be just a disproportionate number of tragic events that have happened in our state. And unfortunately, they're going to continue to happen. So it's incumbent upon our church leaders to begin this dialogue and to think about what can we do to make our congregation, our church experience, safer. Safe, Secure 360. We are a security consulting group located in the Woodlands, Texas. We assist our multiple clients by reducing the risk, loss, and reputation impact. We also do full security assessments on their facilities, large churches, large private schools in Texas, and we want to help you. Take a look at our website, SAFESECURE360.com.
Who would begin that conversation? How does the governing body talk to their attendees about safety?
Tragic church events are going to drive and produce that conversation. Looking historically back in 1999, in Fort Worth, for instance, the Wedgwood Baptist Church, a shooter produced a firearm, killed 7 of the congregation. 4 of them were teenagers. 3 other people were very seriously hurt. 4 were other injuries as well. And then he shoots himself and kills himself. What a tragic event that was. But the worst of the worst in these church crisis events occurred in a rural area called Sutherland Springs, Texas, in 2017. The First Baptist Church there was having a service, and it was going on, and the church was populated. This is going to become the deadliest church attack ever. And it was in Texas, where we live and where we work and where we worship. 26 people killed. 22 people injured as a result of this lone shooter. He produced a weapon and began shooting people. Someone in the church was armed or had a weapon outside in their vehicle. And as he exited the church after doing all of this killing, one of the church members shot him. And they pursued him as he left the scene. The shooter had a military history, and he had a history of violent offenses in the past. He'd assaulted his wife and his stepson, made death threats against people who filed charges against him, and he was dismissed from the Air Force for bad conduct. This shooter was eventually killed, only because of the fast action by members of the congregation, some of who were former law enforcement or military, and then the fast action by our responding police who came to this rural church that had a horrific event happen within it. So when you see an event such as this happen, you wonder how it could happen, why could it happen? But the big question is, what can we do to prevent and predict this and stop it from the future? That's a big question.
You just described the Sutherland Springs shooting as 50 people like seriously affected, and these affect the whole congregation as well. It's traumatic for someone to be in a quiet place of worship and then all of a sudden gunshots. That's so shocking to happen. It's maybe by design from the shooters, very disturbing to the mentality of the people. Is there anything that connects all of these instances of place of worship attacks? Is there anything that connects the type of person that would make this? I'm trying to maybe think of how we could sort of guess. You don't want to guess everything, but how we want to predict that this might be coming again. Is there a personality type that might be attracted to church shootings, or is there something similar between these shooters?
I believe the listeners would agree that for someone to bring a weapon into a church and kill people, mental illness is certainly a factor. Undiagnosed or untreated or improperly treated mental illness is the core motivator, anger, rage, a combination perhaps of schizophrenia, results in behavior that can be deadly. An example of this recently in Houston again in 2024, we have a very large church, one of the largest churches in our state for sure, the Lakewood Church, where a female, which is very unusual, a female shooter with a child a 6 or 7-year-old child, goes to this church, parks outside, puts their emergency flashers on. The church service was not in progress. It was in between, after the service. That female then produces a rifle and had a handgun, and she takes the child with her and enters the church building. As she did so, she began screaming unintelligibly and began shooting towards the security people that were there at the church, using the child, in my opinion, as a shield or as something to delay a responsive action by the police with deadly force because the child's present. It was designed to influence them, I think, and perhaps did. Ultimately, unfortunately, when the off-duty police and the security people from the church did engage fire in self-defense, the child was struck, and ultimately the shooter was shot and killed also. So just look at that event. Mental illness to even do this must be present, in my opinion. Why would someone do this? Are they receiving a message from God? Are they being politically motivated? Do they have some type of revenge or anger strategy that they're acting out? I don't know. But if you bring a child to a church and you're armed and your intent is to kill people, there's something very wrong. Okay, so we know that. How can we predict it? How can we prevent it? Did she broadcast or email or text or write a manifesto or publish something to someone before she got to the church that we could have acted on? I don't know. But that is really our preemptive opportunity to detect this, intercept it, and stop it before it happens. But if there's not intelligence gathered in a preventative measure, then you're just in a reactive measure when she shows up. So I'm glad that the off-duty police, I'm glad that the security officers were there and present and were able to protect themselves and others. Imagine if she would have come during a service. There could have been catastrophic events happen.
In a lot of these stories, a lot of these events that happened, someone in the community of the church was in the service and was armed themselves. And these people are a lot of times stopping these from becoming bigger problems. Talk to us a little bit about, help us understand, this is a complex thing. There's people in church with guns that are there to be protectors, but how is that all managed, and how do they collaborate with each other instead of fighting against each other? What goes into letting members of the church bring guns in?
It's kind of a polarized approach. Either you're really good at it or you're not. Armed church security strategies must be policy driven and must be organized by leadership and members of the church who have a significant background in law enforcement, perhaps, or who have a significant background in legal aspects of force, and who have a working knowledge of how use of force situations can develop very quickly. and have some type of strategy with other people who are armed in that church, who are on the security team also. It's very complicated to acknowledge people who are licensed to carry permittees or who are off-duty police officers who are attending the service. When a threat presents itself, let's just say someone stands up in the middle of the sermon and says, "Preacher, you're not telling us the right message. The devil is speaking through you," or some type of outburst like that. And that person produces a weapon. Maybe not a gun, but a knife or a gun. It could be. Who knows what they produce? What is the plan then? Do the security team members who are armed produce their weapons in an attempt to defend themselves or a third person under the law in Texas? And when and how do they use deadly force, if in fact they do? And which one of them shoots? And do multiple people shoot? And where do those collateral damage rounds that miss or penetrate go? You may have just visualize a circular shooting gallery where you have 3 or 4 people who are armed security people in the congregation see a threat. They present their weapons, and the threat doesn't stop, and they use deadly force and they shoot or attempt to shoot this person. They miss or they hit him. I don't know, but either way, think of the possibilities of collateral damage and unintended strikes by these weapons. It's very high. What if a person attends that service who's licensed to carry or who is a former or current police officer and not known by the security team? And this person perceives a threat occurring in front of them and produces their weapon in an attempt to self-defend or defend a third person. And the security team now sees an unknown person whose intent is to help, and they shoot him or her. Now what? So the composition, construction, and training and policy about an armed security detail in a church must be thought through very critically, and it must be approached very seriously because terrible things can happen.
Given that these are occurrences that happen from time to time, what other steps could churches prepare? Is there always a nurse on duty at a church? Are there other ways that they could think about preparing for an act of violence or an accident or something that happens at a church full of people that aren't paying attention to that type of thing?
The church needs to decide what its policy is on persons carrying a weapon into the church. The church is technically a private property place. However, the public or congregational members or others are certainly allowed to come there. When they do, we start telling them rules. We tell them what time to come, what days, where to park, where you can't park, that you have to be quiet, that you have to have a certain decorum when you're there. Those are all rules and expectations. Well, what do we do about weapons? In Texas, we have constitutional carry, which is a very confusing sometimes to people rule. And we also have the license to carry program where you're permitted to carry a firearm under certain circumstances, in certain places, and not others. But ultimately, the church, or what the policy and the law says, the owner or the agent of the owner. Now, the preacher or the minister or the priest doesn't own the church. However, they are the agent of the owner. An usher may be an agent of the owner. A security officer of the church may be an agent of the owner. The owner or the agent of the owner of the church may erect signage which directs people not to carry an open firearm about their person, prohibits it. You can't walk into our church with a rifle over your shoulder. We just don't allow it. We have our own reasons, but logically, it's just not a good fit. So we prohibit that. We have the right to do so. We may also say that, the concealed carry of a handgun is prohibited in our church unless we allow it through our security detail or through our off-duty police. So what's your position in the church? Can I bring a gun? Can I have a rifle over my shoulder? If I am carrying concealed, don't ask me if I am? How does that all work? Because they're going to be in your environment. So just like you direct and control where they park and what they do and what they can't do, there should be some position about weapons. However, some of our clients do not take a position about weapons. They don't allow open carry, but as far as the signage 30-06 or 30-07 in the Texas Penal Code, they don't have a position about that, nor do they ask their members. There's no metal detectors. There's no way to look at that. So I think that's a fundamental step, is to determine what your church's position is on this. Now, if you have a church and a school that are combined together, there's going to be clear outlined policy restrictions that do not allow the weapon in that side of the building. Well, a door or a fence may separate one side from the other. It may be common areas, perhaps. So how does that work? So I think that developing a good policy about your security team, making it composed of people that are experienced, and having some type of real serious talk about weapons is fundamentally important moving forward in your security strategy.
So if a church doesn't want to take a position, you said some churches or places of worship decide not to take a position on weapons. What's the implication of that? I guess a good policy would be really important in a situation like that. Are there other implications of when you don't restrict firearms, what things might they not be thinking about when developing policies that they should consider?
If someone is injured or there's some type of adverse event that occurs, a shooting or something similar to that, the person that's the victim is going to blame somebody. And they're going to blame several people or organizations or that organization. So I think it's important to have a good, sound security policy and strategy that says what you can and cannot do. And then if the public or the church attendee has a desire to violate those rules or norms, then that is less of a liability, perhaps, on the organization. However, each case is very complicated, and each case has its own merits. So that's for the lawyers to figure out later. But a good rule of thumb is to talk about this with your congregational leadership, talk about this with your pastor, priest, or whoever is the leader of your congregation, and think about it with a security consulting group who does this. Get their input, get their insight, let them help you develop your policy, because it makes sense.
Do churches do trainings for situations like this? If you did or didn't allow weapons either way, what kind of training should a church do with their staff and security team? And should the members be involved in training, drills? How does that all work?
Training is always a good thing, especially when you are managing or responsible for the care of others. And that's what's happening in that church environment, right? All those parishioners that are in there, all those people that are in there are under your control. You tell them which door to come in, you tell them where to stand, where to sit, when to do it, you tell them when to leave, how quickly to leave. So a common drill or something that may happen is a fire drill mandated by the city or the state, the frequency of it. And that is a situation where the congregation, or most of them or part of them, evacuate or leave an area or the entire chapel or synagogue or wherever you are to get away from the danger of a fire or smoke event that may exist. So how do you organize 400 people? How do you communicate with 400 people that it's time to go if you've never practiced it? How many doors do you have? Are those doors locked? How many people do you have with language challenges or with mobility challenges or who are disabled in some way? How do you communicate this and the urgency and the instructions to leave? So the other side is, what if the threat is external, outside of the congregation group, outside of the church? Let's say there's an approaching police pursuit, or there's a warrant service attempt like just happened 2 weeks ago in Houston. And the fugitive's running and being chased by the police, and there's shots being fired. You want to stay in. You want to shelter in place. Have you thought about that? Who's going to lock those doors? Who's going to keep the congregation informed? How are they going to react when they're told to do this? How will children react? So thinking about these scenarios of sheltering in place or evacuating and the fire drill, which is an evacuation, are fundamental, easy to do with your staff. Then you may want to have one of these drills practiced and a drill with your congregation or part of them, because it will give you instant feedback as to, is this an effective idea? We do drills with our churches. We do drills with our schools all the time. We do run, hide, fight drills. We do active shooter drills. We do evacuation, shelter in place. We do weather events, many things. Find a security consulting group that has experience doing this, and we do.
It occurs to me that as you're describing all of this, all of these things are looked at in a church security assessment or a place of worship security assessment. Could you walk us through how this assessment, how it would look for a church, and a little bit about what they might be looking for in a security assessment?
Yes, we do, and proudly serve many churches all throughout Texas with this same process. We want to look criminologically at the crime data historically for that area to give us an idea about, is it trending up, down, is it flat, what's happening? We want to know about any types of recent events that have happened at the church that were of a criminal nature or of a threatening nature. Emails, phone calls, text messages, things left at the church, improvised items. We want to know, is the threat to that church real and exaggerated by some identifiable occurrences? That's important. Then our team goes to the church, and we spend at least 1 day, sometimes 2 days at the church, and we start analyzing around 70 different aspects of the church and the footprint of that church campus. We want to know about traffic control devices and the traffic flow that is bordering the church. Are there traffic control devices and markings that are in place that are proper? Are there lights in place that are proper? Is there signage that's proper? We want to know about that. What's the heavy flow of traffic? What's the light flow of traffic? How about the weekends? How about Sunday? How does that work? Because we want to be able to fit that information into our equation about how we're keeping our children perhaps safe, or adults who are going to cross that street. So we want to know about that. Then we begin looking at the church grounds, the fencing, the access gates. Are they automatic? Are they manual? Do they close on their own? Do you have a time situation? Is there a keypad? Are they open all the time? How high is the fence? What's the material of it? Is it congruently all around the campus, or are there breaks or damaged areas that allow someone to enter? We look at aerial lighting and lighting of the parking lot and approach to the church parking areas. Are the handicap areas lit? Are the handicap areas marked? Are there proper ADA requirements met? Do we have proper signage about speed limits? Do we have proper signage telling those people that are coming what our expectations are? Then it just continues to be analyzing the landscaping, the windows, the locks, the lights, the doors, the push bars, the alarm system. We have deep analysis about medical issues, and are there AEDs and the proper number? Are there stop the bleed kits? Are there Narcan? Are there some type of EpiPen approach? Do we have a nurse there? Do we have an approach to maintaining continuity if we did shelter in place? So it's a very complex process that at the end of our analysis, we interview major people in the organization, the pastor, the priest, the rabbi, and then all of the supportive people that work there, because we want to know what their thoughts are about security. We want to know, are they prepared to lead others during a time of need or crisis? And how would all this fit together in their perspective? And how does electronics and technology help us in this pursuit of safety? It's very complex. Results in a 25 to 50 page written report that we provide our clients at the end of our assessment. And we also debrief this with the board or whoever they want us to talk to. So it's a very complex thing. But I want to touch on one thing that is really important that really isn't thought about too much. Churches, like any large gathering, has the potential to have intermediate medical things happen. In a church, you may be blending young children, infants, all the way up to very elderly with mobility issues, cognitive issues, memory issues, balance issues, diabetic issues, slipping and falling issues. It's really important to think about the church population as one of service. If you had, let's just say, for instance, a large church that had 300 people or 400, some of our churches have thousands of people in attendance. Have you ever thought about who among them is a doctor, is a nurse, is a paramedic, a fireman, a police officer, who are skilled in the intermediate diagnosis and treatment and stabilization of a medical event that could happen? Common cardiac event, common a diabetic event, a slip and fall. Do you have people in that congregation that you can identify and meet with and say, hey, look, we value your skills and your service. Can we count on you during a service to help us? if we had a need for someone to stabilize someone in an intermediate measure until first responders or ambulance arrived? I'll bet you they say yes. Go a step further and put them on a schedule. Well, this week you're a medical on call for the early service. You're one for evenings. And then my advice that I did for my church, I developed a medical go bag. And in this large canvas or large bag that's manageable and liftable, it has primary and enhanced first aid items, tourniquets, a blood pressure cuff, a stethoscope, ammonia smelling salts, Band-Aids, bandages, tape, a splint, Narcan, EpiPen, different types of diabetic approach medicine that is available. With a relationship and orders from a doctor, you can also have available to you supplemental oxygen that can be used if necessary while you're waiting for the ambulance to arrive, or life flight if it was a terrible event or some type of catastrophic event. But think about that. You've got the people there, you invest in this go bag, and you keep it current. You keep replenishing it when it's down. You keep it stored in the usher's closet or somewhere that's not visible but accessible. You give that nurse, doctor, paramedic a radio with an earpiece in it that only they can hear. And if there's a medical event, they're called up and called into service. I've seen it happen. I've seen it work. And it is a great idea to use.
That really is a really great idea. You say often, it doesn't have to go, in our line of work, we say 0 to 100 active shooter. This is for slips and falls, for somebody having a heart attack, something in between. How do I know, if I'm a member of a church, how do I know if my church has a medical go bag ready or has had a security assessment? Who do I talk to about that, and how do I start this conversation?
Church leadership obviously would know. And if they don't know, present them with that concept and say, look, do we have this? If we don't have this, maybe we should. Look around you. Look at these events that are happening in Texas with these critical incidents occurring over and over and over again. Are we ready? Are we prepared? And if we're not prepared, how can I help prepare us? I want to serve. Let me know what we need, and let's try to get it together. And you'll be surprised how quickly and efficiently and effectively that volunteer community help mentality is infectious. And more and more people will sign on. And I think that when they do so, you are enhancing your church safety and security environment.
Absolutely. Being prepared, you say this all the time, having a prepared response rather than having to come up with a reaction is what you want. Is there any other idea or frame of mind that church leadership, church members, everybody wants this to be a safe, happy place that's where spirituality happens. If you're scared, you can't go there. So everybody wants this place to be a safe, nurturing place for them and their families. Is there anything else they should keep in mind as they're attending church or talking with the elders or planning for the next year's ceremonies? Anything else that we should think about?
A common theme that runs through almost all of our podcasts when they deal with safety and security is a simple concept. See something, say something. You don't have to be an experienced law enforcement officer or a behavioral expert to know or notice that just doesn't look right. That person doesn't look right. That smell is not normal. That smoke is not normal. That yelling or screaming is not normal. That looks dangerous, the way they have that door propped open, or that thing that they have that they're using temporarily is a bad idea. When you see that, or you see those things or hear those things, tell someone, tell an usher, tell someone in the leadership of the church. They'll listen, and then they can take action. So it's really important to think about that. See something, say something. Such a fundamental thing, but it's so true and valuable.
Well, thank you so much, Robert, for talking to us about this. Our places of worship are very important to our culture, and it's important that we all together take them seriously and let them be what they are and let them be safe and happy for the members. Thank you all for listening. We hope that this helps you provide more security and safety for you and your friends. And like Robert was saying, that volunteer experience of making the world better is infectious. So keep tuning in. We just want this to be a good experience for y'all to watch the show. If you want to hear more about us, or you'd like to find out about our services, client list, or anything else, or if you just need some advice, reach out to us, please. Our website is SAFESECURE360.com. This is the Safe Secure 360 podcast. There is safety in numbers.